In the ring, it's protect yourself at all times. In On the business side, outside the ropes, it's protect yourself at all times, no matter what. There's no excuse. If you get screwed over,
Mhm.
the buck should stop with you. It's your responsibility. You are there to protect yourself, and you should be first and foremost, above all, make sure that you protect yourself by understanding what it is you're doing within this business world.
And that's it. That's all she wrote.
Hey, my name is Armando, Best in Boxing, and this is the first video in our series covering the business side of boxing for fighters who are going to come into the professional ranks or are already in the professional ranks, just starting out, looking for guidance, looking for information to be able to help them succeed on the business side of boxing. Uh, our first guest is Gino Mazzanti, attorney at law from San Diego, California, practicing in the state of California. He is also a licensed professional manager, licensed by the California Athletic State Boxing Commission, a lover of the sport of boxing, got into boxing because of that love. Welcome, Gino. I appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you, Armando. Great to be here.
As always, and well, full disclosure, you have helped me a lot. You helped me a lot for Global Sports Streaming, my company that produced Anderson Silva versus Chavez Jr. You've always been there for advice, so I want to be able to introduce you to other people who are in boxing who need who would need your guidance as you're well aware of, and I want to make everyone aware of that. You're out here to help boxers who need advice, who need help, and looking for professional guidance from someone like you who has a legal background and understands the legalities of the sport of boxing. Um, Gino, just to start this off, how where did your love of boxing come from, and how did you spin that into the business side of boxing that you're in?
Well, yeah, my love of boxing started with my father, who was a big boxing fan, and growing up, I used to watch, the Friday night fights with him, and he always enjoyed. I always enjoyed him, and for some reason, he could always know who was going to win the fight before the fight even started. When I was young, I used to, well, how the heck does he know that? Now that I'm more experienced, I kind of know how, a lot of times you do know who's going to win before the fight starts. So, but I was always mystified by how he was so smart, could always tell me. Fight back then, it was either white trunks or black trunks. And so he would say, yeah, white trunks is going to win this fight. So, but I enjoyed watching fights with him, and he used to order and watch old tapes of old boxing matches of a lot of the old greats, with Archie Moore and Rocky Marciano. We used to watch those tapes, so growing up, I always had a love of boxing from my father.
Nice. So did I. Actually, that's where my love of boxing came from. I was a child of the '80s, so watching the Masters back then, or now we consider Masters, Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, watching those fights on ABC Wild World of Sports. That's how I fell in love with boxing. So,
Yeah, and I think that's true with a lot of guys like you and me. That we get our love of boxing and our knowledge of boxing originally from our fathers. So I think it's great to pass it. In fact, my son is a great boxing aficionado too. He enjoys boxing, and he got it from my father and me. So yeah, I know what you mean.
nice. How did you come into the professional side of boxing? When did that come in?
Well, I actually met a man here in San Diego, Lou Messina, who had been in, this was 20 something years ago, who had been in boxing a long, long time, even before that, big in San Diego, the local area here. And he had managed boxers before. And I actually met him at a gym, a boxing gym that my son was working out in. And my son actually met him first, introduced us. And so we got to talking, and he recognized that I had a love of boxing. So he asked me if I wanted to manage boxers with him. He was a manager at that time, and he knew that I was an attorney and thought maybe we could take advantage of my legal knowledge along with his knowledge of the boxing community and his overall knowledge of boxing at that time. So we teamed up and started managing boxers together. So that's how I started.
I have to ask you, so there is the fan side of boxing, which doesn't peer much into the business side of boxing. So when you started to get your first look into boxing, what was your first impression?
Well, yeah, when Lou first asked me if I was interested, I said, yeah, but Lou, I really don't know a lot about even the legal stuff about boxing. I kind of knew, I knew something about the actual sport of boxing, but not the legal stuff. But my impression was that there's a lot more to it than meets the eye,
Right.
as far as managing boxers and the legality of it all, and how to handle boxers as a manager, and how to negotiate contracts and so forth. The management contract between the manager and the boxer is a very important starting point. To get the relationship off to a good start. And so you have to know something about that, what can make the boxer happy, what might not make him happy to put in the contract. So all of that was a learning experience for me at first. But along the way, I picked up a lot of knowledge about that. And I enjoy passing on that knowledge to other people who are in boxing.
One of the things that I found fascinating about boxing is that the business side is unlike any business I've ever been a part of in terms of the overall structure, to where there is this unofficial farm system that feeds into the major promoters. And those promoters, because of the contracts that they hold with the broadcasters, really hold the keys to the kingdom. And I have seen a lot of wealthy business owners, very successful business owners from other sports come into, or not from other sports, just from other businesses, come into the sport of boxing, think that they can run it the same as other businesses, and they end up, losing a lot of money because they just don't understand the business of boxing at the higher levels and how the system feeds into it. As a manager, do you help educate the boxers on this system, this farm system that the majority of them are going to participate in, and that unless they're signed by the major promoters right off the bat, they are going to have to be part of this feeder system that feeds into the bigger promoters?
Well, yeah, a lot of young boxers just getting into the business. It's kind of, you have to kind of confront them with a reality check as to how fast they're going to be able to move up in the rankings if they're good and they can continue to win. And a lot of it is, really not based on merit, but based on who you know and what that person can do for you, and what your manager can do for you, what your promoter can do for you. We've all seen it, the boxers moving up in the ranks that aren't necessarily, the best. And we have boxers at the top, getting bouts or matching up with boxers, not because of the challenger ability, not because of merit, but because that's who the champion wants to fight. And so a young boxer has to realize that a lot of the stuff that happens in boxing, doesn't really, isn't all merit. You can be the best boxer in the world and take you a long, long time to get to the top. unless you do things right. And that's when an experienced manager or promoter can help you out. Really.
As a young fighter, do you advise them to have a manager right off the bat?
Well, yeah, that's a good question because, if you have a manager, obviously, when you start out boxing, you're not making a lot of money. You can't make a living starting out, but unless you're one of the top people, unless you're a former Olympian or a really good champion amateur or something. When you start out, if you're in that class, when you start out, you could oftentimes sign with a promoter that has a lot of money and can afford to pay you to train and pay a lot of your expenses and build your record up. 95 or 98% of the boxers who start out, they're not like that. They have to start out, with a lot of times promoters and managers and so forth that aren't going to pay them a lot of money, so they can't make a living boxing. They have to oftentimes work a full-time job along with that, along with their boxing career. So it can be really, really tough for them to do that. You have to educate them about what to expect. And it's going to be a long, hard road, to build up their record and to get them to a point where they can, start getting bouts where it would where they can make, something that they can live on. So boxers have to realize that most boxers have to realize that it can take a while, and most of them think they can. A lot of them think they can, start boxing and take the world by storm. When they find out, initially what, or maybe their first 4-round fight, and they find out, they're going to get $600 for a 4-round fight, and their manager is going to take a third of that, and the trainer is going to get 10% of that, and they have all these others. They're not making a lot of money. So a manager can help them go through that. But if they don't have a manager, obviously they don't have to pay a manager's fee, and the manager typically gets a third of the boxer's gross purse from a fight. That's the maximum that in California. That's the maximum a manager can take from a boxer from his purse. And let me qualify what I'm saying here. What I'm saying pertains to California law. Commission rules and regulations in California. Other states have similar rules and regulations and laws to California, but they differ from state to state. But so mostly what I'm saying here applies to California law. One of those laws really is that a manager can take up to 30% of a boxer's purse. So that's one of the downsides of having a manager. But the manager can be very helpful to a fighter, because a lot of times managers know the rules and regulations of the commission and the boxing laws in California, and they have certain knowledge about commission rules and certain things they can tell the boxer to do that can save them a lot of time and a lot of money, and even win matches for them. So we can get into some of those things if you want, but I think a manager generally is important to a boxer, because if not, there are a lot of things that managers can do, and if a boxer doesn't have a manager, the boxer is going to have to do it rather than spending time in the gym working out and working at his job making a living. So the boxer can be very beneficial, or a manager can be very beneficial for a boxer.
So there's a lot to unpack there. So first, I think for any fighter coming in, they need to understand the definition of a licensed professional manager. So is it important that a fighter checks the background of someone who's calling themselves a manager to make sure that they're a manager and actually licensed with a commission?
Right. A boxing manager has to be licensed by the state athletic commission to be a manager. And a manager is simply any person who represents the interest of a professional boxer in getting or arranging fights for the boxer, and directs and controls the activities of the boxer. And in looking for a boxer, a fighter, needs to first of all find out whether the manager is licensed by the state of California, and the boxer, it could, ask the person if he or she is licensed, and find out from them. And they can also double check with the state athletic commission. They can call the athletic commission and find out if that person's a licensed manager. So you want to find out if the manager is licensed. You also want to find out if the manager is experienced, who that manager has managed, and what boxers that manager has managed in the past. What other boxers, and what other boxing managers, what their opinion of this person was, this prospective manager is, and whether it's a person that the boxer likes and can get along with. Those are some of the things that a boxer should be looking for in a manager. And of course, knowledge of the sport, knowledge of the rules, and his ability to the manager's ability to use that knowledge in a beneficial way for the boxer.
So that what I'm hearing with that is the key is do your due diligence. No matter what somebody tells you, always check and verify that what they're telling you is the truth. Telling you that they're a manager, check to see if they're a licensed manager, check their reputation. In this business, there are a lot of guys who are very, let's say, verbose and talk in a way that they seem they're convincing and that they know the sport. At the same time, I've noticed that there's a lot of guys like that who aren't even licensed, that act as more an advisor, and I would suggest staying away from those type of people, unless they are verified through reputation with other fighters. Do you agree, disagree that you should do your due diligence before you make your decisions?
Absolutely, that's an excellent point. You do need to do your due diligence, and if the person is not licensed by the state of California, this person you're talking to be your manager, he can't legally manage you in the state of California, and so.
What if they're licensed? Excuse me, real quick. What if they're licensed in, say, Texas, but they're representing a fighter who lives in California? Is that legal? Or do they have to register in the state that that the fighter lives?
Yeah, you have to. If you're you can manage a boxer if you live in California. Excuse me, if you live in, let's say, Texas, and you have a boxer that you want to manage who lives in California, that's fine. But you need to notify the state of California that you have a registered manager's license in Texas, and they'll issue you a license in California, so that when you have a fight in California, you're a registered manager there, and that would entitle you to all the things that managers can do. Especially at a fight. If you're not a registered manager or a registered second at a fight, you can't go in the dressing room, you can't be in the corner, and you can't share a percentage of the boxer's purse. The manager can't if he's not licensed in the state.
So it matters where the fights are at. So if you're a manager in Texas and you have a fighter that's based out of California, and say they're fighting in Florida, that manager has to register in Florida, correct, in order to collect from the commission there?
Correct. And if you're managing, if you live in California and you're licensed in California and you have a fight you get to fight or a fight in Florida. When you go to Florida, you have to pay the Florida Commission for a manager's license. But generally, it's a little less than paying for a brand new license, since you've already got the license in California. But yeah, you want to make sure that if you're a manager that you do that. And indeed, the Florida Commission in that situation will make sure that they get their money from you before they let you participate.
Right. Yeah, the commissions,
Right.
the commissions always collect. I'm
Right.
sure of that. As a fighter, you are looking for certain things out of your manager. One, that they're licensed in the state that you're going to be fighting. Two, that they have the connections within the sport of boxing, not just with fighters, but with other managers, with trainers, with promoters to be able to help you get those fights. They also help out in contract negotiations. And I also see the top managers have connections with advertising, so they're able to bring additional funds for a percentage to the fighter. Is there anything that I missed? Is there anything else that the managers you're looking for them to do for you?
Well, those were all good points. Yes, those are qualities you want in a manager. And I might add too, you might look for a manager, and this isn't, always possible because, a lot of times boxers don't have a lot of choice on who wants to manage them, especially if they're just starting out. But a manager too that maybe knows or has connections with one of the sanctioning organizations, who knows people in the sanctioning organization, because it is possible that, if a fighter moves up in the rank, and let's say he's ranked number 12 by the WBC at some point, the manager, if he knows, these people, the individuals at the WBC who might be involved in ranking, they have, you know, WBC and all these other sanctioning orders, they have banquets at times and so forth. And so if a manager can, go to one of those and talk to these, sanctioning representatives, it is possible for them to even schmooze them and talk to them and talk them into advancing you in the rankings. Say, hey, I've got this fighter that's ranked number 12, but he should be at least a top 10 because of this and that and the other. And it has been done at, after that, the fighter, because of what the manager has told the people in the organization, they might move up a notch or two in the rankings. So that's important too. And all those things that you mentioned too are also important.
Yeah, that's great. I didn't think of that. Yeah, the belt organizations are very have a lot of control within the sport, so it obviously makes sense for a manager to have those relationships in place to be able to help. Um, so at the top levels of a sport, any fighter that is signed to a top rank, a Matchroom, a Golden Boy, any of the top promoters, the fees that are necessary in order for a fighter to fight are paid for by the promoters a lot of times. And they may be, depending on your level, they may be taken out of your purse, or they may just be covered by the promoter as part of their fees for having you under contract. So that's, to me, pretty straightforward. Where I think we run into a lot of gray areas are the fighters that aren't signed, the fighters that are B-level fighters, C-level fighters that don't have contracts. I believe fighters need to understand that when they come into this sport, it's unique in that you're going to pay these, someone has to pay these fees. And as an unsigned fighter, you're going to either pay the fees yourself, your manager is going to cover them for a percentage, for that 30%, which is negotiable. And they need to know that not only are they going to be training all the time, have a full-time job, but the money from their full-time job is going to help to pay for their career to get it off the ground. Devin Haney is a perfect example, as he's, world champion right now. He fought down in Mexico. He paid for his first 10 fights, if not more, to be able to get his record going because he wasn't an established signed fighter right out of the gate. And so let's talk about that a little, and then, go into details as far as what it's like for fighters and managers. So as a manager, you've worked with a lot of unsigned fighters. Do you find that as a good manager, you're paying out of pocket to help these guys out?
Well, yeah, sometimes that depends. And, if you're a manager and you see a kid that is just starting out, or maybe he's won a few fights and you think he's got a lot of potential, obviously, you might want to sign him and invest money in him, invest money to help him train and to help him live and so forth. So managers oftentimes do, and promoters too, will shell out money to help a fighter live and to get going and to eventually build up his career. But you're right, there are a lot of expenses, especially with a young fighter starting out. And you mentioned it earlier, most of the time now, if you're a young fighter starting out, you're going to have to pay to get fights. Well, I would say most of the time, but a lot of the times, you're going to have to pay to get fights. And if you're a young fighter starting out, sometimes, at least here in California and in San Diego, where I'm from, a promoter will sign a fighter that he thinks has promise. And there are a lot of professional boxing matches in Mexico, in Tijuana and in that area. And a manager will sign a fighter, and in order to get that fighter experience and build up his record, he'll pay the Mexican promoter to put the kid on that promoter's card, and sort of handpick the opponent for the kid, to give him experience and give him a challenge in the fight, but someone he can beat. That's that's one thing a manager can do for you. But it's a lot of times, if you're an inexperienced fighter, you're going to have to pay a promoter to put you on a card or do something else for promoter to get on the card. But again, it depends on your experience and your potential as a fighter, as to how long that's going to have to happen, and how long it takes to build up your record.
What's the typical? I'll come back around to that, but I'm curious. This popped in my head. What's the typical time frame for a contract with a manager, especially when are there set times, especially when managers are investing? Because it's, to me, what you're describing is an investment. Managers, for unsigned fighters, if they're helping to pay the fights, they're investing in this fighter with the potential of getting their money back. Now, obviously, there's no guarantee to that, but in terms of a negotiation, if you were to put money out for a fighter to help him pay for fights, you want to be compensated eventually to get that money back. Does that change the negotiation that you have with the fighter in terms of the length of a contract? And are there limits, according to the commissions, on how long you can have a contract with a fighter?
Yes, there are limits on how long a manager can have a management contract with a fighter. In California, there's a 5-year term limit, on the contract duration between a manager and a boxer. The contract can't last any more than 5 years. After 5 years, if the parties want to enter into another contract, that's fine, but there's no obligation to do that. So you're right. The manager has, 5 years, to invest in this fighter, spend money on him, and then hopefully get that money back before the contract expires after 5 years. And that's not always possible. We were talking about earlier, sometimes it takes quite a while to build up a record. And you're right in that a manager can invest a lot of money in a fighter, and after 5 years, you could be right on the precipice of getting a good fight. And if the contract is going to expire, there's no obligation for the fighter to re-sign with that manager. He can sign with somebody else or not sign with any manager at that point if he wants. So, yeah, the manager has to be careful in how much in the investment he makes in a fighter. Not always easy to determine how much to invest and if you're going to get a return on your investment, within that 5-year period. Sometimes it's just impossible to determine. But hopefully you can build a relationship with the fighter from the get-go. And that's one of the important things in starting out with a young fighter and entering into a management contract with a young fighter to include terms in that contract. And again, you can't always the contract, at least in California, is a form contract, and you can't change it except for there are certain things you can add to it. But what you want to try and do as a manager, at least, is when you're entering into a contract, and a fighter too, you want to try and make it fair to both parties, because if the contract is unfair to either the boxer or the manager from the get-go, it's going to cause problems. It's going to cause resentment. And if it's unfair to the boxer, you can believe it that after 5 years, the boxer's not going to re-sign with the manager if the boxer thinks he's been taken advantage of for 5 years. So you want to put terms in the contract, in the management contract, that are fair and don't cause problems in the relationship, over the 5 years.
Giving advice to fighters on navigating the sport for the first time. I remember what it was like when I was 20 something, arrogant, didn't want to listen to adults or anybody older than me because I knew it all. And looking back at that, I really didn't know a damn thing. And I have it, especially in a sport of boxing where you have a testosterone-filled fighters who have this tendency to not want to listen and to go their own way instead of taking the advice of people who've been through this, especially, I mean, it's good in business in general, but especially in this business where there are a lot of nefarious characters wandering around looking for people to take advantage of, and arrogance and inability to listen to good advice can be a detriment for sure, and can put people. There's a lot of examples of fighters who have gotten ripped off because they associate themselves with the wrong people and wrong characters. As far as the business side of boxing goes, what do you feel some of the first things a fighter should do when they first get into the sport? They're obviously doing all their training aspects, but is there something in particular that they should look for to set up the business side of it? Whether that be, take business classes, start studying books on business, something to help them navigate the business side of it.
They're really, aside from just having a decent general education, and maybe taking some business class, and even that might not be all that useful in the boxing business, because that's sometimes has unique aspects to it that you won't find in an everyday business course. But and that's why I think it's important, if you're starting out, to get a manager who is a boxing manager, professional manager, who has some experience and knows these things and knows about particular boxing contracts and promotional contracts and bout contracts and how to negotiate those things so the boxer won't be taken advantage of. If you're a young boxer, don't have a manager, and you're doing okay, and there's a promoter maybe wants to put you on his card, and they're in that situation, the boxer is going to have to sign a bout contract with that promoter. Okay, now the bout contract is again a standard form provided by the California State Athletic Commission, with certain standard things in it, clauses in it. And it's important that the boxer understand those standard clauses before signing that bout contract. Things like, what happens if you don't make weight? What are those are in the contract, that bout contract, certain penalties if a boxer doesn't make weight. You need to understand that. And those aren't all that hard to understand, really. If you just read the contract. I don't think, 95% of the boxers you sign about contract, I don't think ever read it. But if you have a manager, your manager better read it, because that has certain things that your manager and actually the boxer needs to know. And aside from that, the signing a bout contract, before that sign, you need to negotiate with the promoter, what your purse is, and in negotiating, with the promoter about purse and so forth, you need to know, what to take into account in setting the purse. If you're a boxer starting out, a lot of times it's the promoter, it's take it or leave it. Here, we'll pay you this for a 4-round fight. If you don't want to do it, we'll get somebody else. And there's a lot of times there's not a lot the boxer can do, or even a manager can do, to change, the terms of the contract. But there are some things that a manager might be able to, and the boxer and needs to understand from a business standpoint, so he doesn't really get boxer, like you were saying, doesn't get taken advantage of by a promoter. There's certain things you can use to negotiate with the promoter, like the size of a purse. Obviously, the more rounds in a fight, the larger the purse generally is. If it's the main event, the larger the purse generally is. A TV fight can command a fighter more money. If it's a short notice fight, fighters can often get more money than they ordinarily would for signing a short notice fight. And obviously, the number of rounds make a difference. The more rounds a fight is, generally the higher a price you can make. So, yeah, and a fighter originally starting out and that's part of the business aspect of it, may not understand all those things and how to negotiate those sort of things. And again, there are a lot of times there's not much, like I say, a manager, a promoter they're in the driver's seat most of the time. And so a lot of times it's taking or leaving. But sometimes a manager can get you a few little extra things that you wouldn't ordinarily have gotten had it not been for the manager. So inexperience can cost you a little bit of money, especially starting out, and it costs you a lot of money if you don't know what you're doing after you've been established. And again, a manager can help you do that. So I don't think there's any kind of courses. Getting back to what you were originally asking, Armando, it's kind of a long-winded way, an attorney's long-winded way around of saying that there's no really hard and fast thing I can say to educate a fighter to the business aspects of it, other than experience, and preferably get yourself a manager, someone who's experienced in it and knows what they're doing.
I would also like to add to that. I think I know it's very important for the fighters. You had mentioned that some of the fighters don't even read the contracts. As a fighter needs to see themselves as a business, as their own entity, and seeing themselves that way, they need to participate in all aspects of it. Yes, especially on the sign. Yes, they have to work 40 hours a week. Yes, they have to get up and do their road work before they go to work and train afterwards. If you really want to make a go in this business, you have to understand the contracts, read the contracts. And if you don't understand the contracts, then have a manager that helps you understand them, or have an attorney that helps you understand those contracts. It is very important that a fighter does their due diligence and doesn't leave it to an individual. It's just, it's as good as your manager is. You always in business, you always check. And so reading your contracts, understand what you're signing before you sign it. If you have a manager present you a contract that has additional stipulations besides what, say, California has required, I would suggest even have an attorney look at it. And if you can't afford an attorney, maybe you can find someone to do it pro bono. But having that knowledge, that second opinion, always, if you have a family friend,
always check, verify that what you're being told and what you're signing is legit and favors you or is equal to what the promoter or the manager is getting, so that you can protect yourself. I feel it's like it's in the ring, it's protect yourself at all times. In on the business side, outside the ropes, it's protect yourself at all times, no matter what. There's no excuse. If you get screwed over, the buck should stop with you. It's your responsibility in the end, not the managers, not the, I mean, the manager's there to protect you. At the same time, you are there to protect yourself, and you should be first and foremost above all, make sure that you protect yourself by understanding what it is you're doing within this business world.
Right. That's good advice. And you want to make sure that if you're signing a contract and you you negotiated a contract or that you're going to be signing, it's in writing, and you understand that there are in the negotiation, you're anticipating that certain things be in that contract. You need to read the contract to make sure that all of those things are in fact in the contract. A lot of times, maybe even an unscrupulous manager or promoter will say, "Oh yeah, well I know we talked about that, and I'll take care of that. I know it's not in there, but we don't need to put it in the contract. Don't worry, I'll make sure that happens." Well, no, don't do that. If it's your understanding or a certain thing has been negotiated, it's your understanding or a certain thing has been agreed to, make sure it's in writing and make sure it's as something understandable that you can understand and that you know that, okay, that's what we talked about. It's in the contract, fine. But if it's not in the contract and you're expecting it to be in the contract, don't sign the contract. Okay, make sure it gets in there in a way that you can understand. Right.
Right. And there are, because and I wish it wasn't this way, but it is within the sport, even with managers and promoters who are at the top of the sport. A lot of times they act in their self-interest and not the fighter's self-interest. And it's because they can get away with it, because the fighters allow them to get away with it, because of whether it be the inexperience, the ignorance, the arrogance of the fighters. It allows those men who, even if they're good men, to do bad things. And I don't want to sound like a broken record here. At the same time, I've just seen it at the top levels of the sport. I'm talking guys that I've had conversations with who are former world champions, multi-million-dollar fighters, have had horror stories of when they started off signing contracts that they didn't understand and losing out on big chunks of money because they had signed money or without knowing what they're doing to managers. And a lot of times there's relationships between managers. Again, these are managers that don't behave the most ethically, that work with the promoters or work with the matchmakers who have relationships established for years before they had signed, a particular fighter signed. And then it turns in, because of the relationship that the promoter or the matchmaker and the manager have, that supersedes the relationship with the fighter, because a manager wants to continue the relationship, the larger relationship with the promoter. They act as an intermediate, but really they're leaning heavily towards what the promoters want. And this happens again at the highest levels of the sport, because you're talking about 6-7 figure salaries and purses that, pinching off a little here and there, and if you do it with enough fighters, can make a manager, can make these backroom deals that happen within the sport, make an individual a lot of money. And the fighters are the ones that suffer. And I just want to emphasize that, and I can't emphasize it enough, that again, it comes back to read your contracts, care about your business, because you are a business.
You're a brand, you're a fighter, you're an individual. If you incorporate, you're a corporation. You should protect all of that and do not rely on your manager if you do not 100% trust them. If it's a situation, I mean, even fathers have screwed over their sons, but you look at like the Haneys, right? Obviously, Devin can trust his father. They have a great relationship. Unless you're in a situation like that, you need to act as if everyone is out to get you. And it's to just say that sucks. It sucks to say something like that, but it's a reality of the business of boxing that there are a lot of people who perform unethically within this business. And as a young fighter, you need to understand that going into it. Not everyone's out to get you, but if you hook up with the wrong people, it could cost you dearly, especially if you're talented. You're going to attract a lot of individuals, and some of those individuals are only out for them. They only see you as cash. They don't see you as a person.
Right. They'll make a lot of promises to you that they can't fulfill or that they don't intend to fulfill.
Right.
And that points to gets back to talking to the prospective managers out there. A manager has, under California law and under the standard management contract that a manager signs with a fighter, one of his primary responsibilities is to look after the interest of the fighter. If the manager does something that isn't in the fighter's best interest, or it's cost the fighter some money, or costs the fighter a fight, certain things he may do to enter into some kind of a backroom deal or something with the promoter at the expense of the fighter, that obviously is grounds for a suit for a breach of contract by the fighter against the manager. And if the commission is bad enough and the commission knows about it, they'll revoke the manager's license. Incidentally, if there's a dispute between the manager and the fighter as to the contract that they have, the athletic commission, California Athletic Commission, will arbitrate it between the boxer and the fighter. So if there's a beef between the boxer, maybe the manager didn't fulfill his side of the contract, he can file a complaint with the California Athletic Commission, and they'll set up an arbitration to decide the dispute. But again, and that goes back to what you were originally saying early on, Armando, the fighter has to do his or her due diligence to find a manager that has a good reputation and that is known to look after the fighter's best interests. Now, that doesn't absolve the fighter of the responsibility to look after himself, like you're saying, protect himself at all times. Read the contract, make sure you know what's going on with the fights and so forth. Make sure that you talk to the manager, make sure he's disclosing everything that's going on. But the fighter needs to know that, and the manager needs to know, hey, listen, you need to look after the fighter's best interest, his personal interest as well as his financial interest. So, again, if you're looking for a manager, do your diligence and find somebody that can look after your interests.
Right. So a lot of times the sport of boxing is seen as an individual and of course an individual sport, and of course it is in the ring. But there is a team behind every fighter, and that's their cut man, their trainer, their managers, and putting together that team, advisor, whoever you need to be successful in the sport. It's not an individual business. It is a group effort. And that starts with the fighter doing what they need to do to secure the right people around them. Those who have the talent
and have the proper team around them can find success. And those, I've seen plenty of talented fighters move nowhere because they one, either don't have a team outside of their trainer, or two, they just pick the wrong team. And it comes down to, it can come down to choices of opponents, picking the wrong opponents, picking fights that are that a fighter's not ready for, and derailing the career before it even gets off the ground. And so it's very important to put a team around you and to talk to multiple people before you make decisions that will affect your careers. There are a lot of times where I've seen fighters that I wasn't part of their advisory team, and so I couldn't put in my 2 cents, but I knew that they were stepping into a fight that they shouldn't have stepped into because they weren't ready for it. And I watched them get beat, and it completely derails their careers. And that comes from not listening or taking bad advice and choosing opponents that are better than you. And as a fighter, you have to step in the ring knowing that you're better than that person, right? It's the mental aspect of it. At the same time, you have to be able to trust those people around you to be like, no, you're not ready for this fight. It's too much. And that's just one example of the decisions that have to be made early in your career, because if you're decent and you're still under development, a promoter may see you and be like, oh, this guy's a good opponent for my A-side guy. And my A-side guy can beat this guy. And so I'm going to put this B-side guy in there. It's the B-side's responsibility to do their research on the A-side fighter to see if they can actually beat him. Because sometimes they can. Sometimes the promoters make mistakes and the B-side's better. But a lot of times the fix is always in the matchmaking. You know, a lot of people say that boxing's fixed, and I don't say boxing's fixed from the commission side. Boxing is fixed in the matchmaking, because like we start off this conversation, your father always knew who was going to win the fight. Well, trainers, managers, promoters, matchmakers know who's going to win the fight before they step in there. And as a young fighter, you think that you can beat everyone, and you don't have the full perspective because you could be stepping in there with somebody that you're not ready for. And that's something that your team is going to have to give you a wider perspective on. And so this example is just one of the many examples that you'll face as a young fighter, that you're going to have to decide, you know, do I have the right team, and do they have my best interests at heart? Because there are managers who be like, deep down, they know their fighter's not ready for it, but you know, the promoter's offering a significant amount of money. So I'm like, let's just put the kid in there and collect our money. That still happens. It's not unusual. So picking the right team is extremely important. And that's my 2 cents on, that's my 2 cents on the team aspect of the business side, having the right team around you.
Yeah, I agree. Let me amplify the part about the team. It is very important to have a good team, and it's very important that the trainer and the manager can work well together.
True.
If you're a fighter, young fighter starting out, most of them already have trainers that are training them that they like. When you sign a contract with a manager, the contract says in California that the manager has a right to pick your trainer. Okay, so if right off the bat you sign with a manager and your manager doesn't like your trainer, there's a problem right there. So you want to make sure that before you sign with the manager, if you have a particular trainer, you need to work that out with the manager. If the manager has somebody in mind that he wants you to train with, it's his right to do that once the contract is signed. Now you may say, okay, so you want to work that out beforehand. You may say, well, I want so and so to train me, and the manager says, no, I don't like him. I want to have somebody else train you. Then it's your right. Okay, I'll sign with somebody else. You have a little bit of negotiating. But if the manager makes his offer to you to manage him attractive enough, you may say, as hard as it may be, to abandon your old friend who is a trainer and go with somebody who the manager says. But getting back to the teamwork, one of the things that, and you touched on this too, that, and there is any sport, just as an aside here, I don't know what sport that might be tougher than boxing. I have the utmost respect for any boxer who gets in that ring. I mean, the training that they go through, and the punishment and the adversity, and then getting in the ring and giving it all in the ring. I have nothing but respect for someone who does that. Maybe the toughest sport there is. And, so having that in mind, as a manager, you don't want to, and your team, even your manager and your trainer should oftentimes talk about your next bout, and if the manager gets an offer for a bout, you should discuss it with the trainer, part of your team, to determine whether it's a good bout for you to have or not. If it's not, a lot of times one of the difficult decisions is for the trainer is to say, no, I don't think you're ready for that. Yeah, it's a little bit of money. They're offering a little bit of money, but you're not ready for that. One of the worst things that a manager and a trainer can do is, like you were saying, put that fighter in a fight where he's not ready and he gets beat up. And that's a lot of times fighters don't recover from that.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of times there'll be a short notice fight that some promoter will call the manager up and say, hey, we got this short notice fight so-and-so, next weekend. Is your fighter available? We've got, X thousands of dollars to offer them, an attractive offer. But if your fighter is not in shape, and he goes into the ring and gets beat up badly, it's going to affect, more than likely than not, it's going to affect his career for the rest of his life. So you need to work in conjunction with your manager or trainer to get the best fights. And like you say, don't get into a fight with an opponent before you're ready. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem. Now, having said that, one of the hardest things for a fighter to do was that if he doesn't have a fight that he signed for in the future, it's hard for him to keep up the training like he should. One of the things that a manager should impress on a fighter, and the trainer should impress, stay in the gym, keep working out, be in top shape for these short notice fights, because that's one of the quickest ways for a boxer to move up and get better opponents, is to take a short notice fight and beat that opponent. But if you're going to take a short notice fight, you better be in shape. You just can't walk in off the street and box him. And that's one of the things a trainer and manager can encourage the fighter to do: keep in the gym, keep in shape, and who knows, you might get a short notice fight that you can win, and that will take. But yeah, the teamwork, teamwork is very important. Everybody has to be on the same page, and it's important that before you sign a management contract, you can put together a trainer and even a cut man that you're going to be working with, that you can all work well together with.
Right. And I want to step into this in future conversations, but for right now, just to touch on it, I have watched as fighters develop, they're working with trainers that are good amateur trainers that just happen to be with you when you're an amateur and take you into the pros, and they're learning on the job too. But you may, as a fighter, advance your trainer. You may be advancing and learning quicker than your trainer. You have to be able to be as flexible and as slip and move that you do in the ring, you got to be able to do that outside the ring and make the tough decisions. As I have seen fighters stick with trainers that are not um, professional trainers. They're great in the amateurs, but there's a massive difference between the amateurs and the professionals, and there's a lot of trainers who aren't ready. I'll give an example. I won't name the fighter. It was a very recent fight. This fighter was a B-side fighter on a card for a big promoter, and he stepped up to take a fight that he was definitely the B-side. But I watched him not have the right game plan, not know how to execute that game plan, and then when he was pressured, he folded because there was no game plan ahead of time. And I know the trainer has always been a great amateur trainer, but when it came to the pros, not so good. And this fighter was clearly not prepared. It was in shape, looked great in terms of physical shape, but when he stepped in there, clearly didn't know what they were doing. There is a difference between a professional trainer and an amateur trainer. And there's a difference between a trainer in the gym and then a trainer who understands what to do during the fight. And not to say that you're going to, find that all in one, because a lot of times you're not. And especially if you're on the lower levels of the sport, you're just learning, you're not always going to have access to the top trainers, because we can't all go to Robert Garcia's gym and he's going to say, yes, I'll train you. Or you can't go to Freddie Roach's gym and say, yes, I'm going to train you, because it just doesn't work that way. So you get who is in your area. But when you have the opportunity, you have to be able to recognize, despite loyalty, it's a business, and your trainer should understand that when you're ready to make the move to a better trainer, that they should understand that you're going to make that move, that you need to learn. I've seen it many a times where there are fighters that are being held back by their trainers because they've just outpaced the knowledge of the trainer and need a better trainer. And it's just a reality, and it should be a business decision. And the manager needs to help out and help negotiate that transition to the new trainer and end it amicably, because I've seen a lot of trainers get hurt, their egos hurt, because it wasn't done properly. And it can be done properly, and it's something that will happen at some point. Not all fighters stay with their trainers. Most don't. They have their amateur trainers, and they need to progress to better trainers. And it's just a reality of the sport. So this is a topic that I want to go into further with trainers, with other fighters who have experiences, in future videos. And I just wanted to touch on that a little bit, because your manager, knowing that we have, I have you, Gino, here, that your manager can help you with these. That's has nothing to do with the fight. These are the things that happen in the gym that your manager, if you have a good manager, can help you negotiate, can help you navigate the tough decisions that need to be made as you advance in your career. Have you ever run into a situation like that where you've had to move a fighter because he wasn't developing the way you wanted him to with the trainer?
Yeah, I've had some experience with a couple amateurs. Like you say, if you're an amateur fighting and you've been fighting for a long time and you've had the same trainer, and then you want to go pro, now you've developed a bond with that trainer. An amount of trust, a friendship with the trainer, and when you go pro, like you're saying, a lot of the amateur trainers, are not good pro trainers. They don't have the experience to train like a fighter for the pros. And I've had some experience where, yeah, you have to sit down with the fighter and the trainer too, because it's hard with the trainer too, as well as the fighter, that, these two have this bond. They've been through so much together, but, like you say, it's a business decision. We need to move on, and we need to go with another trainer that we think is better suited for a fighter. Now, also, there are certain trainers that are not the pro trainers that can't train a certain can't train a certain style of fighter very well. There are certain fight styles that some trainers can train well. Other trainers, if it's a certain fight style, they can't train that. They don't know, or for some reason, they can't train in that style that the fighter needs to fight in. So that's something that needs to be addressed if it's happening too. And a trainer often can recognize that, hey, I have this style of fighter, but and this trainer is good, but not in training this style of fighter. So you need to address that too.
All right, that's a good point. Yeah, because styles do clash in the gym between, a more there's say a Cuban style like an Ishmael Salas who teaches fundamentals more, boxing, the sweet science of boxing, and then you have say a Robert Garcia who teaches very aggressive fighting style. Those two, if you have fighters that one is a boxer, he may not mesh with a Robert Garcia where you have a pure fighter who just wants to get in their brawl. He may not mesh with an Ishmael Salas. And so having your manager help you find the right trainer is also an important, I feel, an important part of being a manager, and that manager fighter relationship is giving that advice to be like, okay, this, yeah, he has the big name, but he doesn't teach the style that you need to win.
Right.
And again, business decision, not an emotional decision. It's a business decision that you need to make in order to put your career on the right path.
Right. And as a manager, if you're going to make a decision like that, even with the amateur trainer versus the pro trainer who may not be able to train in the right style, you need to handle that sort of delicately because, this like this pro trainer, he may be a good trainer, excellent trainer, but just not for your fighter. You don't want to burn any bridges. You want to try and handle it in such that, hey, if you do ever get a fighter with this particular trainer and train in that style that the trainer trains in, you want to be able to go back to him. So you need to be able to sort of negotiate it and handle it in a way that it doesn't ruffle too many feathers. Although you're going to ruffle some feathers no matter what, but you want to try and make it as amicable as you can.
Right. I feel that we've covered a lot of ground. I've held you on here for a long time. I wanna thank you. I really do appreciate your time. I do invite you back as we do more of these. I would love to tap your brain some more about other issues on the business side between managers and fighters as I do more in this series. I would love to have you back. Thank you very much, Chino. I really do appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Amano. Thank you for having me, and looking forward to coming back with you sometime.
Great. Is there any? Do you have any social media, or is there if somebody reaches out, can I put them in your direction, or do you have?
Sure, you could. I really don't have any social media they can look me up on, but if someone reaches out to you, or they can look me up online, or I can give you my phone number right now, 619-233-6397, or my email, gm@gmazzanti.com. If anybody wants to reach out to me, fighters, managers, promoters, whoever, I'll be do whatever I can to talk to them and give them whatever advice I can.
All right. Thank you very much, Chino. Really appreciate it.
All right, Amano. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.